thank you for inviting me to Ukraine. It's a marvelous country. Before I left, there's something called the State Department said, do not come, do not come, do not come, do not come. This is the Russian border thing, but I decided they kept saying do not come, but it's just it's another country that has good people and good growers, and so I'm glad I was able to come and visit. What we're going to do today is just review some growing hazelnut principles, nothing too complicated, but how we grow them in Oregon, and have spent 2 days visiting orchards, and I'm very impressed with the knowledge that's there, that growers have been doing their research, and they're doing a good job. I think there's some things to consider, and we'll cover that over the next little bit, even to be more successful. But I see Ukraine being able to do a very good job. Okay, technical. Okay, where am I from? This is a picture of the world. It comes from a place called Oregon. It's on the Pacific side of the world, and it's approximately 8,000 kilometers to the west. Oregon's a very maritime climate, similar to around down the Odessa area. Our elevation's only about 1,000 meters. We get lots of rains, 1,676 millimeters, so we get lots and lots of rain. The winter temperatures are very mild at anywhere from 0 to -5 degrees Celsius, and the summer temperatures about 31 to 43 Celsius. This is an average 1 to 5 year old trees, about 3,100 hectares. We've had a lot of new plantings going on. 6 to 10 year old trees, 10,000 hectares. Fully mature old tree, about 12,000. And then new, between 1 and 3 year old trees, about 2,000 hectares, for a total of almost 40,000 hectares. Hazelnuts have been growing in Oregon since the 1800s, and so it's been going on there a long time. We have about 1,000 different farms, and it kind of consists of, anyway, the top is what's called British Columbia, Canada, and then Washington's above us, and then Oregon. It's in what's called a very maritime area, doesn't freeze very much, and so it's one of those perfect opportunities. If you go south into California, it gets too warm. They grew grated pistachios and almonds. And so again, in Oregon, it produces 99% of the U.S. production of hazelnuts. In eastern United States, they're growing short bushes, and so, but again, very low production. Different size of the orchards. Average is actually quite small, about 46 hectares, sometimes called gardens. Most farms are between 36 and 50 hectares. Some are as large as 142 hectares, and we now have a corporate farm with over 1,214 hectares, so very, very large. And we have some small orchards that are 2.2, and so again, just various different people that are being successful at growing hazelnuts. This is what's called a planting scheme. A lot of growers have been doing it for a long time, and that can be good and bad, because if we have 140 growers, that means we have 140 different ways of growing the same product. And that's okay. That's how we learn how to do lots of things. As we can see here, this is the general planting scheme. Our general rule is every third tree, every third row we have a pollinizer. So again, most hazelnuts need to have good pollen to be very productive. And so our general rule, every third tree, every third row works extremely well and has been very, very advantageous for the last bunch of years. There are some people thinking about what's called very intensive hazelnuts. Again, we don't know if this is going to work or not. We're doing a lot of what's called experimentation. Kind of what I discovered in the orchards is, do we know if the American varieties are going to grow here? We don't know. And so the recommendation is to plant various trees. You know, the Italian varieties, the American varieties, plant them out so within 4 years, you'll know that answer. I mean, I can tell you really good examples of good trees, but are they going to grow in the Ukraine climate? We don't know. And so I think as farmers, experiment. Find out if they grow or not. Kind of the same thing, is the tree the best or the bush the best? We don't know. And so you need to look at that and as an industry, do some testing so you can say, oh, this works. Ooh, this doesn't work. Just because I say this works, bushes may work. I don't think so. But again, we don't know. And so that's kind of the fun thing about growing, is that we can do a lot of testing very quickly. What's called the general design of the trees is we've done a lot of what's called double planting. And so we have lots of trees. The big problem is at year 7, you have to take out every other tree. Your yields are very good, and so most growers don't do that. And also the trees begin to crowd and production goes down. We have discovered that 9 out of 10 growers that do the double planting hate it, because you have to remove every tree, you have to dig it out, you have to remove the stump, and so economics are good, but the work value is horrible. But again, just be aware these are some of the things that we have seen. As I said, it's just very difficult to be able to remove the extra trees. It causes stress, and so in most cases, just not recommended. Here you have kind of a new orchard that was planted, and so kind of the reason I put it here is that, okay, all they did was plant the trees, and now there's competition with the grass, with the hazelnuts. So again, lots of little things to begin to think about when we begin to plant hazelnuts or have planted hazelnuts. Knowing that the world still does plant bushes, even in eastern United States, they're planting bushes. They're small, they're not very productive, but again, I saw some very innovative farms that have planted bushes. They're pruning them correctly, and what's going to happen to them in the next 4 years? I don't think we know. But as long as you do it as a proactive stance, you know, put in a row, put in a hectare, we'll be able to learn very, very quickly what is best for the industry. This is some shots taken from Turkey. And again, you know, this is how they grow in Turkey, but the recommendation here is let's thin out the open center for the bushes. If you look at this bush, in a few years, you're only going to be growing hazelnuts on the top 2 meters of the bush. If we thin out the bush, open up the center, you're going to double the amount of nuts. And so we'll talk about pruning in more detail in one of these presentations in about 45 minutes. And so again, we can make bushes be productive, but we have to think about how to do that properly. And so again, thinking about, okay, if we're going to grow bushes, we need to open up the center, but how are we going to get the nuts out of the center of that bush. Either blow it out or hand rake it or those type of things. So again, there's just more questions with the bushes that we need to continue to work on. Hazelnut care, again, it's a choice. Grow it as a tree, grow it as a bush. We've been growing it a long time, and all our trees and all our hazelnuts are grown as a tree. Turkey's been doing it as a bush for a long time, so that's, it's one way of doing it. Question is, when do I want to plant the hazelnut? When the trees are available. As we think about it, fall tends to be the best time to plant. As you plant a tree in the fall, it slowly grows all winter time. In the spring, it just explodes, and so that's very beneficial. But being in Ukraine, the weather can, like it is right now, can be pretty harsh. And so is that going to harm the trees? Yes or no? However, if we plant in the spring, the tree's very slow because there's no root system. So there's kind of a, thinking about that, what's the best time to plant is typically the fall, but there can be issues with that. If you plant in the spring, then it's just a slow tree. You've lost a whole year waiting for that tree to begin to grow. New varieties, we have all sorts of new varieties in Oregon. We don't even know if they're good or not because they're too young. And so to be aware as we hear about new trees, you as a grower need to bring it in as an association or as a grower, put in a row or put it in 2 rows and see what happens. See, in 4 years, you'll be the expert. You don't have to listen to speakers from America. You don't have to listen to speakers from Italy. You'll know that answer because, again, the climate so far looks exactly like Oregon. It's cold, it's snowy, it looks good. But do we know? And see, as a grower, you need to know that answer because you're investing lots and lots of money to do that. I want to quickly go through some of the different varieties. No, I guess not right. Let's see. Popular varieties. The best one that we see so far is one called Jefferson. We're seeing some of those being tested in this area. But again, point is we don't know that answer yet. And so just be cautious and proactive in doing those type of things. We're seeing lots of trees being grown throughout the world. That's good. But as a grower, I've been doing this for about 50 years. I think we need to be, unfortunately, concerned about the lack of labor. What's going to happen if you have 250 hectares? How are you going to get those nuts harvested? Are we going to be able to hand labor? I don't think so. So again, unfortunately, moving to mechanical labor and harvesting, I think is going to be very, very important. We have a group of growers that sit down and determine, okay, what's the future? And they're determining, okay, this is what we as an industry want to do. We want to begin moving in the mechanical area. And so they're already moving in that direction as an industry. Planting at different spacing, is 5.7 meter by 5.7. Is that the best one? It is in America. And so again, what's the best one for here? So that's another good one for the university to start dealing with. We see a lot of sometimes smaller growers will interplant. They'll grow hazelnuts, but then they'll grow tomatoes down the middle of the row. We find that not to be good. When we get into growing a crop, we want to make sure that that's the crop we grow. I want to quickly talk about the trees. Here we have a young hazelnut establishment of the trees, and eventually this is what we eventually want. Here we have an established hazelnut orchard doing it extremely well. We have hazelnut trees over 60 years old. And so it's not a short-term investment, it's a long-term investment. You'll hear me say this about 22 times, is even these old trees, we see what's called open center designs. And the concept there is if we can get sunshine within a meter of the ground, that entire tree will be producing nuts. What we discovered is if you go into, let's ask a question. Does anybody have a hazelnut orchard older than 10 years? Anybody? Okay, so virtually young. Walnuts, I assume people have walnuts here older than 10 years. Anybody with walnuts over 10 years? Okay, one person. Okay, when you walk up to the side of the walnut orchard that's full of sun, what do you see on all those trees on the side that have all that sun? What's just totally filling the trees? Nuts. Lots of nuts. And so the concept is how to get sunlight through that tree. It's an old concept, but people are not doing that very well. If we look at hazelnuts, we see that Turkey and Italy doing an awful lot of the production. U.S. is only about 4% of the world, but again, more and more is coming from there. Azerbaijan, 3%, Spain, a little under 3%, Georgia. So hazelnuts are becoming quite popular all over the area. If we kind of look at the bushes just a little bit, if we look at Turkey, bushes are kind of an after effect. I was there, and basically they say they plant hazelnuts after they've already taken the trees and everything. They're there. They plant them on the hillsides, but as land is running out, we're seeing Turkey starting to plant hazelnuts just like everybody else on the flat. It's easier to care for. It's easier to be able to accomplish that. Even though a lot of them are still doing it by bushes, if you let the bushes go, they become very difficult to work with. With bush design, I was told yesterday that they have it figured out to where with the bush design, you're still going to possibly catch some nuts at the base of the plant. But that's still going to take labor to physically to rake those out from the center, or have a good air machine. So again, things you're going to have to be able to think about it, run the economics of what's going on. Here you have kind of what's going on. We have hazelnuts in Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Romania, Germany. So again, it's becoming kind of a worldwide opportunity. As we look at the map, we can see, we have the Black Sea, which moderates the weather. And so we have the area around Kiev, we have the area that is in western Ukraine, and then we have the area south. So again, 3 really good areas with lots and lots of potential for being successful. Again, if you're in Turkey, boy, that looks like a tough way to be able to grow hazelnuts. It's all by hand labor. When we were there, that's the land that was being planted upon. Again, still that way, but again, they're a very large producer. But again, mainly small growers with 1 to 2 hectares. And so what we're looking here is, okay, let's mechanize it, let's plant it on the flat, and be able to do what's called larger scale operations. Was in Belarus. In Belarus, they're hand picking. It works there, but again, the way the labor situation is going, I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be feasible. Here, they're quite unique, is that they're actually planting the hazelnut orchard on a berm or on a mound. Well, why is that? Well, the water's only about 1.5 meters down. And so they really want to plant hazelnuts. Now they have 2 meters of soil. So again, we can manipulate things that are going on. They're doing that all the way around the world. And again, lots of nice flat land where they're beginning to plant new orchards. New thought. And so where's the industry going to go in the next 10 years? Particularly with labor. So the concept is hedging. Just to think about, we don't need to move into it, but again, hedging. By hedging, what happens is we can move almost totally into mechanical processes. In essence, what we're going to do is you have the hedge. 1 year, you shave the left side. The next year, you shave the top. The next year, you shave the right-hand side, and then you weed it. The difficulty with doing that is if you cut the branches, if you have 4 branches, the next year you have 8 branches. Then if you cut those 8 branches, you have 16. And so at some point, you're going to have to come either way back or go way out, because it's called witch's brewing, because every time you make the cut, it doubles the amount of branches, and it's something you just have to think of before it happens. But again, with being able to do mechanical saves a lot of time and energy. Here we have a typical hedge. You can go down through there fairly quickly. And again, hopefully that everybody is aware of is that hazelnuts, the nut grows on that wood which grew last year. And so when you hedge, you lose a little bit of production, but the next year you have hundreds of new branches which then produce the fruit on the nuts. Again, here we have examples of hedging that have begun to be done in America. And again, the biggest issue is how are we going to be able to hedge it and not have lots and lots of these branches that are there. We're seeing very, very intensive plantings, and so here we can plant the trees anywhere from 2 meters down to 1.5 meters. Basically, it just becomes a solid row. We do have equipment. Here's a modified hedger that's pruning both the side and the tops of the trees. And so again, it just have to determine again how large of a tree are we going to grow. This is a blueberry picker that they modified into picking hazelnuts. And this blueberry picker is called a Latog TF for tree fruits. Now has been designed to pick trees up to 3 meters tall. They make a 1 trip through. It totally takes all the nuts from the tree and has done an amazing job. If you're into organic production, in essence, you don't have to mow the grass. You don't have to make it flat for sweeping. And so the concept of using this type of harvester really has some unique characteristics with it. Again, the nuts don't hit the ground. You don't have to flatten the ground. There's no issues with E. coli and manures if you're into organic productions. And so it has a huge opportunity for the unique opportunity for organic production. Here we have just some great charts that are available. We have pollinators, we have when nuts are produced, and then we have what are alleles. Alleles means can we grow those nuts together or not? And the simple answer is the alleles are the second column, the numbers. If there's a number that matches, then those trees will not pollinate. They have to be all different numbers. And so if they're all different numbers, it means all that pollen can be used to to pollinate during the early spring. Now just quickly we'll go through some varieties. The first one is Jefferson. It's probably the most popular one that's out there. It was developed back in about 2009. It's highly resistant to eastern filbert blight. I was told that eastern filbert blight is in a particular area, so it's blight resistant. The kernel is very good for both kernel and for in-shell. It pollinates in early February. Again, big bud mite resistant. And so these new varieties have some very, very good characteristics to it. Again, it's a very upright type of tree. We can get the equipment in very nicely. And so again, growing this tree, double planting it, keep it at 3 meters would fit very well. Or again, we can grow it as a standard tree. This is a newer one. There's 3 different ones that have been developed that are very similar. McDonald is a new one. Webster is a new one. And there's no, Polio. Are relatively, they're all 3 the same. Again, this is more of it's a flatter, shorter type of tree. Again, here's the Polio. Very good. They're smaller nuts. They tend to be, again, developed for the kernel, what's called the kernel market. Again, blight resistant, big bud resistant, so really good trees for that. Here we have what's called the Poly-O. Again, upright, a little bit wider, but again, through pruning, we can get the equipment in, either for harvesting or for the over the head with the lay-top works quite well. All the charts, I think that they're available to you. Talks about when does it pollen, what kind of nut does it have. So lots of great information that's available to you. Part of the Webster. Showing that it's another upright but a little bit shorter tree. Yamhill is considered another very, very good nut producer. Produces lots of nuts. Again, eastern filbert blight resistant, big bud resistant, kernel mold. And so again, just smaller trees for the opportunity to plant more densely, or again, possibly thinking about the process of hedging. And this is, the yamhill tends to be very flat, a lot more branches that hang down, and so we need to prune those up quite a bit more. Pollinizers, again, in America we use 3 different kind of pollinizers, again, every 3rd row, every 3rd tree. And so then we also have an early pollinizer, we have a medium pollinizer, and we have a late pollinizer. Because if we look at agriculture, if we take a date, we'll have years that were 30 days ahead, or we'll have years that were 30 days late. And so again, we need this broad scale pollen because each year, and climate change and all sorts of different weather changes that are happening, we don't want to put everything into one pollinizer. And so having early, medium, late works extremely well. Again, another chart that shows how simply if you're going to use these, how is that going to work to where they're compatible, are they available, and what works very, very well. Again, pollinizers, just real quickly, there's 6 or 7 of those. This one's called Delta. The pollen is late. and a little bit of mid-season. Most of these nuts are also are developed so that they can be processed. So all of the pollinizers are used as nut producers also. Epsilon, another one. Intermediate, again, fairly small nuts. Eta, another good hazelnut. There's also dates of when the different nuts are harvested. But again, most of them are eastern field blight resistant, big bud mite resistant. If we're looking for a general overall good pollinizer, Felix is probably the best one. It's 75%, so it's about 2/3 the size of most of the hazelnuts. Lots of catkins and sheds lots and lots of pollen. So that's the type of characteristic that we like to see. We were told that in one orchard, all the pollen was in the center of the orchard. They were like 300-meter rows, but yet the entire orchard was being pollinized. So it was kind of interesting. Whoa, that doesn't sound like it should work, but yet it was working quite well. Gamma. I'm going to have to research this one a little bit more because in talking to the growers in Oregon, they're saying that gamma is not working as good as what they thought it would be. It's not as viable as it is. It does say that the duration of the pollen is quite short, and they're finding that the pollen is shorter than what they thought it was going to be. So it's not as good as we originally saw it to be. Theta. So again, theta, again, a good pollinizer, small nut, resistant. And York, good pollen through the mid-season. And then the last one, Zeta. This has a late pollen that pollinates intermediately. So lots of options. Again, do we know how well they work here? Unfortunately, not. And so again, a good experiment to find out, are they going to work here? Needs to be done before lots of purchases are done. Just want to real quickly run through just a little bit of the basics that we deal with. In general, through Europe and Central Asia, there tends to be kind of small farms. Oftentimes it's on kind of steep terrain, but now that's moving to larger scale farms on bigger farms. With soils, I consider this to be a fairly big characteristic. We want deep, well-drained soils. We were on a farm and they decided to grow it on sand. That's okay. They have to irrigate more, but that's okay. It's understanding, the characteristics that you have. If you have a situation, what can you do and to be able to work with that. The key is just avoiding the wet soil. This is what's called the general soil. If we're looking at loamy soil, that's what we really want to grow, is within the loamy soil. Kind of what I like to do is go out the orchard, grab some soil, and put it in your hand. It tells you very quickly what the characteristic of the soil is, and if it sticks to you, then it's probably not good soil. If it breaks apart, then that's what you really want. Kind of the same thing with irrigation is to keep checking on the irrigation system. We were talking to our driver, and he deals in irrigation, and now they have set up that they have sensors on it. They bury the irrigation cable, but they have sensors on it that tell if it's not working very well. And so that's the issues of if the irrigation is above ground, you can tell very quickly if it's working or not. If it's underground, you're going to save a lot of water. And they're saying that they now have technology if the irrigation moisture begins to drop. In general rule, if you have clay, hopefully you don't plant on clay, but there is a characteristic that you just use less water, because it holds a lot of water characteristics. Loam, again, is the best. It's a moderate holder of water. Sand just does not hold water very well. Yet critical times for irrigating, usually July and August. Sometimes in June, we had to start irrigating in June this year because it was 40 to 45 degrees from June all the way through October. And so we have to be aware that, again, this weather change is really making growing just more difficult. We have to be aware of what's happening more and more. I'm sure someone is aware out there that I understand that the Soviet Union back in the 70s went through every country and was able to get a good soil test of all the soils. And it's a big, thick book that has all the soil information. And so if the university has it, it's a great resource for being able to find the soils that are out there. pH, again, what we're looking for is a soil pH of 6.3 to 6.8. If you're listening to the Italian people, they like it 6.6 to about 6.9. Very, very similar, so that works. And if we're looking at pHs, again, we want to keep the soil pH right close to 7. That's what's called neutral. Here we have just a soil. What this chart does, it really very quickly says, oh, I'm not worried, It says what happens if the pH is off. And so here we see, looking at pHs, right at between 6 and 7, all the nutrients are available. If you move down to 5.5, you realize you're not getting the absorption of the nutrients. And so the key is to be able to get as maximum amount of nutrients available as possible. And that's what this chart says, is keep it right at 6.3 to 6.8. Corrections, we can correct it very easily. We can use sulfur dust to take care of alkaline soils. We can use calcium carbonate to take care of acid soils. Easy way, kind of recommendation is every now and then is to send people out in the orchard, dig down about 2/3 of a meter and grab the soil to see what's going on. You can have all sorts of different devices out there, but if you grab that soil, you squish it, the water comes out, you're irrigating too much. But if you go out there and it's powdered, then you're not getting enough irrigation. So kind of develop different things to be able to tell what's going on. Also, I discovered one time in my orchard, walked out there, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, man, the leaves were wilting. And so I had found that the irrigation water had been shut off, and I didn't know that. So again, observing the trees is an easy way to tell what's going on. Make sure you irrigate the first year. I hear many stories of where they weren't able to irrigate the first year, and it hurts the young trees. It's a particularly hot year. I know one orchard that lost 45% of its new trees. That's expensive. So even though irrigation is expensive, make sure you get it in the first year. And again, irrigation supports a strong root system. If the root system is strong, it's going to produce well for you. There's less sunburn in August and less sunburn overall. And so the first 3 years are real critical. We recommend mulching around the base of the trees with organic material, and that helps to keep the soil moist. This is called a tensiometer. You get many things out there to test the amount of water. But this is an easy way to at least determine how well you're irrigating. And if you look at all the different ways of irrigating, you can have rain. Like say in Oregon, we have 1,646 millimeters. That's a lot of rain. If you have good winter snows, that's a good source. Rain from the mountains, sprinklers, drip, all sorts of different ways. The key there is to make sure that you have water for the young orchards. With the orchards, again, with mulch tends to reduce the amount of water that is needed. And then by applying anywhere from 7.6 to 10 centimeters of mulch, helps to really to take care of the trees. I'm going to move along. We're going to answer questions after the next presentation. So move along to the next one.